Last week was a record-breaking week at Georgia State University. You might not be aware of that. While all the public high schools around the Atlanta metro area were on spring break, we were getting record numbers of upcoming freshmen attending our campus tours. We had over 2,000 prospective freshmen visit campus last week on spring break to tour Georgia State, find out more about college life. And you know, when you look at this as a national phenomenon, there are over 3 million students who are in that same position right now, graduating high school, getting ready to come to college. And you know, I think there's a really good reason why there's such a premium put on a college education. It really is part of the American dream. You look at the statistics, and if you compare high school graduates to college graduates, the college graduate is about 1/3 as likely to be unemployed. Over the course of their lifetime, they'll earn about $1 million more in income. But there are all kinds of quality of life issues as well. The college education will mean that the college graduate will have better health care, better options in life, longer life expectancy. Their children will be given better health care and better educated as well. But there's a darker side to this story, and that is, while a college education is part of the American dream, right now it is not distributed equally among all Americans. This chart shows some data from the New York Times. It's the percent of Americans who hold a college degree, and it's disaggregated by economic quartile. What it shows you is, if you're among the 25% wealthiest Americans, you have a great chance of earning a college degree, over 80%. And that has grown immensely over the last generation. Back in 1970, about 40% of the population held a college degree. Now it's up to 80%. But if you're among the 25% least wealthy Americans, the story is a much more somber one, that you only have about an 8% chance of having a college degree, and we've moved the needle hardly at all over the last 40 years. In fact, what you can see from this chart is that the gap between the wealthiest and least wealthy Americans is not getting narrower when it comes to college attainment. It's basically doubled over the last 40 years. It's a good introduction to Georgia State University. Georgia State is a non-conventional university. We are perhaps most known historically for our location. We are in a very urban campus right here in downtown Atlanta. Perhaps the other distinctive trait that we sometimes take it for granted here at Georgia State is we're also at the center of a National Park Service historic district. So bisecting parts of campus is Auburn Avenue, and we all know the historical significance of Auburn Avenue. The birthplace of the Reverend Martin Luther King. A couple blocks up, walking distance from where we are right now, is Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Dr. King and his father before him were the reverends. A couple blocks down from that is his birthplace, in between his gravesite. These are streets infused with historical significance, significance tied to the American dream. But for much of our history, Georgia State did not live up to that legacy. We were segregated into the 1960s, and as recently as a little over a decade ago, we were grossly underperforming. We were letting down the families that entrusted their children's future in our hands. Overall, our graduation rates hovered around 30%, and there were significant achievement gaps. Upper-income students outperformed low-income students. White students outperformed students of color consistently year after year. What's interesting about Georgia State's story and the turnaround I'm going to be talking about this afternoon is that it wouldn't be suggested by the demographics. Georgia State, in the 10 years since those data were locked in that we were looking at a second ago, has gone through significant changes. We are becoming much more racially diverse. Back about 12 years ago, the majority population among our student body were white students. Now, as you can see, we're 65% non-white, and those numbers are growing every year. Our students are also less financially resourced than they were a few years ago. We have about 60% of our students now who are Pell eligible. That's double the number of just 6 or 7 years ago. What does Pell eligible mean? The Pell program is the largest federal program for low-income students. The average Pell family in America last year came from an annual household income of about $23,000. So all of these students fall in that lowest band of the first New York Times chart we were looking at. These are the students that American higher education has basically failed. They have not been the students to graduate. And now they're the bulk of the students, the norm at Georgia State. More than that, we've gone through fiscal challenges. During the recession, which hit Atlanta very hard, Georgia State lost $40 million in state appropriations. And I share these demographic details to suggest that if you were just looking objectively at the circumstance and seeing a decade ago Georgia State was underperforming with regard to student outcomes and has gone through these demographic and financial shifts that in many ways have created a more challenging environment, you wouldn't think that Georgia State would be the place where there'd be a significant turnaround. But what we did at Georgia State about a decade ago is begin to get serious about the data and begin to put the mirror on ourselves. It's easy to blame others for failures in higher education. We would love for our K through 12 systems to be stronger. We would love for the state to give us more appropriations. But what happens if we actually ask, to what extent are we complicit in the failure of many of our students to graduate from college? What we've done at Georgia State is begin to look at data and analyze ways in which we are part of the problem so that we can find solutions and be part of the solution. One example is, 6 or so years ago, the average Georgia State graduate was going through 2.5 majors before they graduated. Well, low-income students can't afford to go through 2.5 majors because every time they change majors, they're creating wasted credit hours, added time to degree, added debt load. But we ask the question, whose fault is this? Why are our students having so much difficulty finding the right major? We have 90 majors at Georgia State at the undergraduate level. This semester at Georgia State, we're offering 3,000 different courses. And we used to say to students, now you know, mostly low-income first-generation students coming into the university, pick. You know, here are the majors, here are the choices, pick and pick wisely. Well, the students would pick, but it wasn't necessarily wisely because what 17-year-old has context to choose among 90 different undergraduate majors? They'd pick a major and get into a few classes and 2 or 3 semesters later say, that's not what I want to do, and pick another major. It was our fault. We had set up a system where students would bounce around and add time to their degree. So we've changed the way we do things at Georgia State. We've now launched a new platform. As students get admitted to the university, they can, for whatever they put on their applicant as their major of interest, in this case it's a nursing student, see live job data from the city of Atlanta and the metro region for the number of jobs listed for nurses. What's the starting salary if you have a bachelor's degree? What's the starting salary if you have an associate's degree? So that they can begin to be informed. But like Netflix or Amazon that use algorithms to suggest, well, if you like this book, you might like these other books, we now on this platform are saying, well, if you're interested in nursing, you may be interested in these other careers that you probably haven't heard about before. We offer degrees at Georgia State in public health, in health informatics, in radiologic technology. This morning in this metro Atlanta region, there are more jobs available for radiologic technicians than there are for nurses. But what 17-year-old is thinking about radiologic technology? So now we're getting that information to the students early and often. We're putting all students in the first semester in freshman learning communities, groups of 25 students who travel in all their courses together, building community, building partnerships and friendships. And if you've missed a class or need somebody to study with, you know immediately who's that's going to be because you have friends who are traveling in all your classes with you. But what we started doing about 5 years ago to deal with the bouncing between majors is organizing all those learning communities around what we call meta majors. Let's not make a 17-year-old first-generation college student pick among 90 majors. Let's see if we can find a general area of interest, business, STEM, health professions. If we do, then we put the student in a learning community with 24 other students who are like-minded. They travel in their courses together, and then we push programming at the students. If you're interested in business, the business faculty will host open houses in the departments, have an alumni panel. Your advisors will work with you so that by the end of your first year, you understand the difference between marketing and finance and risk management and so forth, and that once you make a choice, it's a choice that sticks. Do these kind of changes make a difference? They make a big difference. In the first 3 years after we adopted this new approach, learning communities organized around meta majors for all incoming freshmen, we had over a 30% drop in the number of students who are changing majors in their sophomore, junior, and senior years, saving students literally millions of dollars in wasted tuition and fees from bouncing around to different topics. More math instruction. 7 years ago at Georgia State, 43% of the students who were taking introductory math courses were getting non-passing grades. Again, low-income students can't afford to pay for and take a course that is required and have a non-passing grade and turn around and have to retake it the next semester. So we've totally changed the way we do math instruction at Georgia State. Many of the undergraduates in the room know this, that if you're taking these introductory math courses, you're doing it in the Mile Lab. You're not doing it in a traditional lecture hall. You're meeting with your classmates in a room which are sitting at a terminal. Each of you are working on adaptive learning exercises, so you're learning at your own pace, all doing the same chapter of, say, pre-calculus. But for slower students who have trouble getting a concept, they get more exercises that are introductory in nature, so they build up some competency and the course doesn't whiz by them. For more advanced students, they get more advanced questions so they don't tune out. Do these kind of changes make a difference? Well, again, yes, they make a big difference. Since we've changed to this different mode of instruction, same courses, same materials, same requirements, but 35% fewer students are getting non-passing grades the first time they take the course. That's a huge difference, hundreds of additional students passing math every semester. We're using our own undergraduates as a resource. So we have created a supplemental instruction program that is among the largest in the country. This is taking undergraduate students who succeed in a course one semester and paying them to be embedded in the same course the next semester and serve as tutors or instructors to help other undergraduates in the material. Last year alone, we had over 1,000 sections at Georgia State, course sections, that had an undergraduate tutor embedded in it, and the students who avail themselves of this service do about half a letter grade better in the same courses as their classmates. We've gotten national attention all the way up to the Wall Street Journal for our microgrant program. We saw that we were losing over 1,000 students a semester because they couldn't cover the cost of their tuition and fees. And some of these students were dropping out for just a small amount of money. Many of these students were seniors. They were close to graduating, but because their Pell or their Hope or their aid was running out, they were stopping out right before they crossed the finish line. So back 4 years ago, we started a new program. Students don't have to do anything. They don't have to apply. We just look right before the drop for students who are making progress towards the degree and have balances below $1,500. And in many cases, we just put the money in the account. You're good to go. Your bill has been covered. You don't have to pay it back. You're all ready to go for the next semester. This program has proven so effective that we've given over 8,000 of these grants out over the last 4 academic years. And 70% of the students who get one of these grants is graduating within 2 semesters, a big transformative difference. The last program I'm going to talk about is probably the one that's gotten the most attention, our use of predictive analytics. We found that too many students who were struggling academically were dropping out before anybody ever reached out to help. So about 6 years ago, we created a big data project. We looked at 10 years of our data, 2.5 million grades of Georgia State students. What we were looking for is what academic behaviors in the past have students performed that correlate to them dropping or flunking out. What kind of can predict the fact that a student is beginning on a pathway to dropping out? We thought we'd find a couple dozen things with statistical significance. We found 800 different academic behaviors performed by Georgia State students historically that correlate in a statistically significant way to them flunking and dropping out. And so now what we're doing at Georgia State, and many of you undergraduates know this, is we're tracking every student every night as we update our information systems for every one of those 800 alerts, every one of those 800 risk factors. If one of them is triggered, then an alert goes off to the advisor assigned to you the next morning, and within 48 hours, there'll be some kind of outreach. You'll get a phone call, you'll get a text, you'll get an email, but some kind of intervention. A lot of what we're tracking now is just common sense. We have these program maps. This is our BS in chemistry. It maps out what students should be taking every semester. But we've got 50,000 students at Georgia State, and we weren't watching whether students were actually following their maps. Now, every time you register for a class, it's being compared against your program map to make sure that it actually will get you further along towards graduation. Doesn't mean you can't take an elective that's off your map, but it does mean you're going to get somebody who points out to you that that course is an elective and kind of an extra course that will not contribute directly to your degree requirements. Last year alone at Georgia State, we had 2,000 instances of students who had signed up for courses that didn't apply to their degree program, got a phone call or got a meeting, and about 95% of the students changed their registration by their own volition. What do the predictive analytics look like? Something like this. It's a simple example. But we found that there's a strong correlation between the first grade you get in your major and your chances of graduating on time. We've run this for every major at Georgia State, so these data are just examples. But if you're a political science major and get an A or B in your first political science course, you're graduating on time at over a 75% clip. You get a C in that first class, you're graduating on time at a 25% clip. But what we had done historically at Georgia State with that C student was, basically nothing. You pass them along to upper level work, whatever weakness is evidenced by the C grade becomes exacerbated, and students begin to pick up Ds and Fs, and then we intervene after a few semesters. That's backwards. Why not intervene when there's the first sign of a problem evident? So now that's exactly what happens. An advisor reaches out, they talk to the student, they may look at the exams and papers. Maybe it's the student's working too many hours. Maybe it is writing issues. But let's diagnose and solve the problem now. The trick here, though, is scale. And over the last 12 months at Georgia State, we've had over 52,000 one-on-one, in-person meetings between our academic advisors and our undergraduate students based on alerts coming out of the system. We didn't correct all 52,000 problems, but I can say 5 years ago, before we launched this platform, almost all of these 52,000 problems were going completely undiagnosed. Students were signing up for the wrong courses, they were underperforming in prerequisites, and nobody was helping. Nobody was saying anything about the issue. Does this kind of intervention make a difference? It makes a big difference. Almost immediately when we launched this platform in the summer of 2012, we saw a significant increase in our retention rates. Ever since we launched in 2012, our progression rates have gone up. Progression rates are not just looking at how many students come back 1 year to the next, but it actually how many students come back 1 year to the next and have accumulated 30 more passing course credits in that 12-month period. And these numbers have gone up remarkably in a very short period of time at Georgia State. Other good news is since we launched this platform, the average time to degree has declined by about half a semester. The graduating class of 2016 took about half less of a semester to finish all their requirements as the graduating class of 2013 just 3 years earlier. That's incredible progress because now the students are making fewer mistakes. They're taking fewer wasted credit hours, they're finding the right major earlier on, they're passing courses at a better rate. Does that kind of gain make a difference? It makes a big difference as well. $15 million in savings in tuition and fee costs for the graduating class of 16 compared to the graduating class of 13. Another big surprise of launching these platforms is students are succeeding in more difficult majors. The two fastest growing majors we've had since we've launched these initiatives have been computer science and biology. Every year since we've had the platform in place, we've set new records for the number of low-income and students of color who are completing STEM majors because we're finally giving students a fighting chance. We're intervening as early as 2 or 3 weeks in the semester. If a student underperforms on a quiz, saying, here's tutoring help, here's supplemental instruction, and it makes a significant difference. Why is all this work so important? Well, it's been good for Georgia State. We didn't have a large identity beforehand. Now we're getting attention in the national press for being at the leading edge of innovation, the leading edge of the use of data. We've been invited to the White House. President Obama has specifically talked about these kind of interventions at Georgia State and the transformative difference that it's making. That's all very gratifying. It's also not why we're doing it. We're doing it for this reason, because more students are succeeding. We're up 1,700 degrees granted every year compared to where we were just 5 years ago. And if you look at the students who have most gained from these interventions, it's the students who struggled the most beforehand. So we're up about 30% in degrees conferred overall, but over 80% for black students, 90% for Pell students, over 120% for Hispanic students, Latino students. Students are succeeding because these interventions make a difference. And those graduation rates we started with a few minutes ago, where we were hovering around 30%, it's not just that they've gone up, they've basically doubled. And we're close to tripling the graduation rates for some groups, like our Latino students and for African American males. As a result of these kind of interventions, Georgia State now has an interesting distinction. We are now the college or university in the United States that confers the most bachelor's degrees to African American students. That's the first time in U.S. history that that distinction has not been going to an HBCU. And last point here, last data, is just showing nationally the comparison between the percent of students on a campus who are low income and graduation rates. Nationally, there's a steep correlation. Each of these diamonds is a national public university. As the number of low income students on campus goes up, the graduation rates go down. 6 years ago, Georgia State was actually below the dotted line, so we were underperforming even compared to the national average. And as we've scaled these programs up, we've become more and more of an outlier, so that today, among all our peer institutions, Georgia State has the highest graduation rate and the highest Pell rate. And some will tell you that's not the way it's supposed to work. You know, if you look at the data, you look at the norms nationally, as low-income students increase, graduation rates are supposed to go down. But the whole point of the efforts of a place like Georgia State University is to set a new model, to come up with a new convention that actually is worthy of the trust that our students and their families put in us. Thank you very much.